Welcome to our webinar today. Isn't it time to monetize your library? We could also probably call this, isn't it time to automate your media supply chain? My name is Curtis Staples. I'm with Cinnafilm. Let me introduce our panel to you, get us started. We have Emmanuel Pain. He's
Hi, everyone.
the development manager with Embrace. His associate, Anand Jahagirdar, who's a solutions architect with Embrace. We also have MC Patel, founder and CEO of Emotion Systems.
Hi, guys.
Fereidoon Khosravi, Chief Business Development Officer with Venera Technologies.
Hello.
And Don Jackson, VP Products and Services with Cinnafilm. And got things popping up on my screen. I need to get them out of the way. I said good morning. I should have said good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and what are you still doing awake? That's probably how I should have begun this. Our four companies have been comparing notes over the last few years of various things that we're up to. We all find ourselves positioned in the core of many media supply chains around the world. And one of the prevailing things that we often hear from customers and other folks that we speak to is, discussion about companies that are not necessarily in a position to integrate. They don't have a person or a team, let alone one person, to deal with the APIs and all the other shenanigans that are required to join together multiple solutions and platforms. And we thought, well, isn't it time that we took some responsibility for that? And that's what we've done with our four companies. And we'll get into what this scenario looks like here. I don't know, Nan, if you can slide to the next, or head to the next slide, and just identify quickly before I hand off what it is that we all specialize in. Embrace is an orchestration and more than that solution. Venera have under the general umbrella of quality control, but much more refined and detailed than that. And then we have Cinnafilm and Emotion representing video and audio transformation, which could be anything from restoration, up converting, down converting, side converting, run length adjustment, all those kinds of things that these gentlemen will speak about. Anyway, let's get one final note. The timing today, we're going to shoot for about 35 minutes. Then we'll go into Q&A till about 45, unless there are more questions, in which case we will continue to answer questions until we run out of questions or we run out of time at the top of the hour. Any questions that don't get answered, we will follow up with those people who ask those questions after the fact. Anyway, to get us started, let me hand off to Emmanuel. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Hey, thank you, Curtis. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Emmanuel Pain, Business Development Manager at Embrace, and I'm delighted to be with you all. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction and a little bit of context about this webinar today. Definitely, we see a fast-changing media landscape where content owners need to expand the source of their revenue. Obviously, monetizing media libraries has always been a primary source of revenue, and content owners today are evolving in a more complex environment. It's especially complex on the distribution side because you have a world today combining SVOD, AVOD, direct-to-consumer platforms, fast models, and traditional linear models, etc. So that new reality brings basically three things to be able to perform. Number one, it's all about audience engagement. And to have great audience engagement, you need excellence in your technical content preparation, both for audio and video assets. Content owners need to reach broader audiences by enhancing the viewer experience and loyalty. That is the primary point. Second aspect is you need to adapt to consumption trends. Consumer preferences shift towards digital and on-demand content, And content owners have to comply to new platform constraints to monetize their content through these new channels and platforms to make sure that the content remains accessible and relevant. And obviously, you also need, in a world where we see a shift in the volume of production, you need to take the opportunity to maximize the value of your libraries, and you need to diversify your income sources by reducing dependency on a single revenue stream. So all this means today that we live in a world where you need to be ready and prepared for global expansion. Expanding content distribution to international markets, often with localized content and language options to tap into new audiences and revenue opportunities. In that context, at Embrace and with the group here, we picture a new reality that customers are facing. Number one, we see archives that are increasingly larger with new types of media. And number two, international distribution leads to very complex mandatory localization workflows. So to maximize the value of your content, priority goes today into efficiency in workflows and technical operations. Last week, I was talking to a customer. They have 150 VOD channels, more than 300,000 assets, and over 50 different types of devices to support. So from a single verified source, and we'll talk about verification with Fereidoon in a minute, from a single verified source, you now have to generate dozens of versions with multiple codecs to support all the different distribution points. So practically, how do you approach this? Number one, automation with your processes. You need to automate. Number two, you need agility and scale, because and agility and scale in across everything, basically, end-to-end, production, content prep, delivery workflows. Because remember that historically, content owners faced numerous challenges to integrate all different vendors, multiple vendors, and they had to manage the cost of complexity. Today, with a software first based approach and open APIs, it is now possible to streamline and automate the preparation of your content with media supply chain orchestration. We have new design principles. Curtis touched on that a little bit. Number one, it's all about reliability and efficiency, scalability to add capacity or burst workloads, and reducing complexity as the number of destinations for content explodes. So what we're showcasing today is a unified solution where Embrace simplifies the integration of essential media supply chain components, the one that you have in your slide here, reducing the burden on media companies to engineer complex systems independently. Embrace pulsates, orchestrates, and manages workflows, ensuring efficient job management and task distribution within media operations for better efficiency and collaboration. Now, let's jump into the details with validation and verification with Fereidoon. Fereidoon?
Thank you, Emmanuel. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Fereidoon Khosravi with Venera Technologies, Chief Business Development Officer. So Venera is in the business of quality control, QC. And as Emmanuel mentioned, one of the areas that really is interesting to us is the fact that volume of content, as Emmanuel mentioned, is continuing to grow. There's large libraries of content that's being prepared for monetization. There's value and there's high demand for that content. And as Emmanuel also mentioned, localization is a big factor in proliferation of content. No longer US created content alone, but worldwide content is being dubbed and subbed and prepared and delivered and consumed everywhere on many, many platforms. So there's continuous need for automated QC for this massive amount of content. So whether a content owner has thousands of files, hundreds of files, or maybe a few files, they need to go through this process of to QC the content, not only for a technical QC to make sure audio, video, and captions are okay, but also make sure to verify that the content is ready for the platform for which they're delivering and meeting the specs for that platform. So as a content owner, as I want to move this content from my library to delivery, the first step is to validate this content. Is my content any good? Is it okay? Does it have audio? Is it have the right number of channels of audio? Is it mute in certain sections, or is it have the proper loudness? Or do I have slate and color bar in middle of my content, which I don't expect to have, I shouldn't have? Or is it the right frame rate? Is it the right resolution? Is it SDR versus HDR? All these are the things that the content owner will need to validate before they move to the next step. Many of the content, almost all the content now, has captions coming as a sidecar with it. Are those captions in sync with the media? Is there caption missing in certain portions? There's audio, there's no caption. So all that needs to be validated in the file, and that's what QC does. And you can imagine the vendor would have to then take, the content owner would have to take a look at this content report by report, where the issue, see where the issues are, get an editor, get a colorist to fix these things and scale, which is not practical. And so I'm very happy about 4 of us getting together and automating the process so that all this can be, the media transformation could be automated, and then others will talk more about it. So once the content has been transformed as ready for delivery, as the last stage, there's a verification. So that's another form of QC where we verify this content. In some cases, we need to generate some certificates, for example, for hardening PSE, photosensitive epilepsy, which needs to go along with the file. Or do compliant QC. This content is going around the world. There's some, in some countries, we need to verify, is there smoking in there? Is there violence, drinking, foul language? At least mark them so that as the content is delivered, they know what things to look for. So the value Venera brings to this picture is the validation at the beginning and verification at the end, bookending the whole process that happens in the middle, automated and orchestrated with Pulsed, with Embrace. So with that, I'll turn it over to MC to talk about audio transformation.
Thank you, Fereidoon. I'm MC Patel. I'm the CEO of Emotion Systems. So as Fereidoon mentioned, when the content is delivered for distribution, Venera look at the files and determine whether the audio is in the right format for distribution. And when we started the company, a lot of our customers are saying, these QC systems tell me what's wrong. What do I do about it? And so we started the business about 15 years ago. The traditional practice there was to go into an edit suite or a Pro Tools suite and take care of it. But as the content volume increases, that's no longer an economic proposition. And we started our business really looking to meet loudness compliance. About 15 years ago, the audio industry was turned upside down because we went from peak-based measurement that everyone understood to loudness measurement, which is the average audio level in a program. So there wasn't an obvious way to fix it unless you were a trained audio operator. So my company, we developed some algorithms to measure the audio and fix it so that we were compliant. And at that time, we took care to make sure that the algorithms that we chose didn't modify the creative intent. So we were very careful in our choice of algorithms to do that. And then over the period of time, we were asked by the customers to automate the process so that high volumes can be handled. And also, when people realized we could take audio out of a media file, do something with it and put it back, they said, hey, if you can do loudness, can you do track mapping? Can you do Dolby encoding, decoding? And so we built a library of tools and created a UI to allow you to essentially create workflows and execute them. And that's really what our business does. So as the file comes in, if it fails to meet the audio requirement that you need to deliver to, we execute a workflow to take care of it. And we work with Embrace, which specifies the workflow based on the information that Venera has given us, and then process the audio accordingly. So having spoken about the audio, I'm going to hand over to Dom to talk about the video transformation.
Thanks, MC.
Thank you, MC. Yeah, so, you know, much as MC and emotion will fix up the audio and make it right for whatever your delivery spec is, generally speaking, if you're monetizing archive content, if you're selling archive content, there's going to be a number of things that you're going to need to do to the video, and that's really where Cinnafilm come in with the Pixel Strings platform. That could be as simple as a file format conversion, but particularly for older content, we would probably also be looking at some level of noise removal. If content's being delivered OTT, then it's going to probably need to be progressive, and most old SD content will be interlaced. We may also need to, or frequently will, if it's standard definition content, we'll need to up-res from standard F to HD or even UHD these days. And potentially also there may be some need for frame rate conversions. You know, different countries use different frame rate standards, and so your delivery spec may require different frame rates, which is kind of where Cinnafilm grew up historically in that frame rate conversion, motion compensated frame rate conversion world. I think a couple of more general comments around this. You know, we're talking primarily about monetizing older and archive content, and just to echo some of the thoughts from Emmanuel earlier, you know, it is very clear now that we have reached the peak of spending on new content, at least for the foreseeable future. You know, 3 or 4 years ago, the amounts that were being spent on new content were ridiculously huge, and now they're dropping very, very significantly as the particularly the big streamers realize that it's simply not a sustainable business model. But you still need content, so this is the time when some of that older content particularly is really going to come into its own. There's a lot of very well-loved content that people love to watch frequently again and again and again, and making that available over all these different delivery channels that Emmanuel referred to, and in these different territories, as Fereidoon said, is hugely important. And I think this concept that we're talking about today with small vendors, each of whom are highly expert in what they do, with these very streamlined automation tools, provides, again, a very cost-effective and highly optimized way of addressing these content transformation problems and requirements that frankly change day to day. So you can't do yesterday or do tomorrow what you were doing yesterday. It's a dynamic process as you bring on new endpoints and sell to new customers. And I think over now to Curtis.
Yeah, Dom, thank you. I think this is obvious, but it's just to state, we're going to be heading into a demo section here, but a vast majority of what we're dealing with nowadays, or a fact that we're dealing with nowadays, is, and one of our team said this yesterday, I think it was MC, that the truth of the matter is that the content that we're dealing with, in most cases, was not produced for the platform that it must be delivered to today. And that is a single sentence that describes one of the key challenges facing everybody that's involved in this industry. Emmanuel, did you have any other points you want to make before we hand off to Anand?
No, I'm good. I think we can move forward with a clear illustration. It's a simple illustration, but MC, maybe you want to add something before we jump in.
Yeah, I think Dom raised a point about small manufacturers. I think one thing that I'd like to point out is all of us have chosen to specialize in a specific subject. task, and we have worked very hard to be the best at it or very good at it.
Yeah.
And what this allows you to do is, I think that there is an expression that they're using called microservices. We provide those microservices, and what we're demonstrating here is the ability to string a set of microservices very efficiently and quickly without a lot of expertise to take care of it. And the second point I wanted to make is the one about the archive. If there was really good content that was created a few years ago, the chances are it was for a TV station, for a series. In our case, I often use the example of Fawlty Towers, which was really for domestic consumption. And monetizing that outside of Britain wasn't even thought about at the time, apart from perhaps America. Now that wants to be monetized across 100+ platforms. So you need to create that media in a form that's acceptable to those platforms. And that's the process we're describing, and how to do it quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, well said. And never before there'd been more famous 12 episodes of television than Fawlty Towers. All that fame from 12 episodes. Anand, are you all set to go?
Yeah, I am.
There
Thanks everyone for the discussion. So we're talking generally about media supply chain. We have 4 main elements of what a typical media supply chain could look like here. So we have sourcing the media, validating that media, transforming that media, whatever that means, verifying that transformation, and then delivering. So if we were to take that and apply it to the 4 vendors we have on the call today, it might look something like this. So starting at the top left, maybe Embrace takes care of the sourcing aspect. And then next we have a analysis/verification by Venera that can be done using either the Quasar or the Pulsar product. Embrace can then check those results, and then depending on those results, we can route to 2 different locations. So here we're going to route to Emotion to do some audio processing if there's audio issues. After that, if there's video issues, we're going to do a Cinnafilm transformation via pixel strings. Once both the audio and video have been transformed, Embrace can get that stuff back, give it to Venera again for a final QC, and deliver. Now, all these steps are great as individual steps, but it's even cooler when they're all tied together via some sort of automated process. So if we take this conceptual diagram and put it directly into Pulsit, it might look something like this. So here is a actual functional sequence within Pulsit. Pulsit is the workflow orchestration tool designed by Embrace. And again, this one starts at the top left too. And I'm just going to zoom in a bit as I go through this to make sure everybody can see the text. And so starting at the top left, the first box you see here, or task as we refer to it, is select media. So here we're given the user the option to browse some sort of storage, whether it's S3 storage or local storage or other cloud storage, and pick a source media file to present to this workflow. That's one way to do it. You can also automate that, obviously, if you want a totally seamless process. But once that media is selected, the first thing it's going to do is give it to Venera for a verification pass. So what this is doing is essentially checking if the source media is good enough to sell. So we don't care about the final output delivery specs here. All we care about are things like macro blocking and color levels and general quality of the source media. The other few things it's going to check are to see whether or not it matches some of the basic output specs required by the client. So things like frame rate, color space, and audio channels maybe are some things you want to check. So once it does this, we'll get that information back, and then we'll check those results. And here, either we're going to say we need to fix the audio, in which case it's going to go down to Motion Systems, and then go to the next step, or it goes straight to the next step if the audio is already within spec. Once it does that, it checks the video results. And again, if there's things that need to be changed on the video, or if there's some upresing required, color space conversion, etc., it'll pass it to pixel strings. Pixel strings will do a transcode. And then in all cases, it's going to end up handing it back to Venera Quasar towards the end. This is where it's going to do its final delivery QC. So here we're doing one final check to make sure that the video looks good. And then once those results are back to us, if there's no more issues, we'll pass them on to the last step, which is deliver. This can be done by some common tools such as Aspera or Signiant, whatever. Or if we do find some other issues that were not addressed by any of the previous processes, we'll display that media in a player with markers and tell someone that that video needs further analysis by a human so that we can make the right choice manually. So that entire sequence can then be encapsulated into a single step. And when you submit that sequence, you can do it as, for an example, here. So here's a custom Pulse-It dashboard. And I've double-clicked my ECEV sequence. And then now I can launch that sequence. And in my jobs, I now have a pending job. This would allow me to browse, again, that storage location, pick a media file. I'm going to pick my Venera sample file, select that media, hit accept. And now that job has been submitted. So it's going to run through all those steps without any further human interaction. The only time it may prompt for some user input is if the final results still flag some issues that they want someone to see. And if that's the case, they can see it in one of our embedded players. So this is Accurate Video Validate by CodeMail. And here you can see I have the source video. I can browse through it, but I have the 3 flags that it found on a really high level check. So it found the wrong frame rate. It found that it was SVR instead of HLG, and that it had 2 audio channels instead of 8. Maybe I don't care about those, but potentially there's also some more checks that I want to do. So here I have an example where you have Venera coming back with several issues with the source. And then those issues are, again, showed within the timeline. And on the right, you can jump to those issues. You can see exactly what that is. And it just gives a nicer way of presenting that report potentially to a user who wants to see it in a player. And then lastly, if you want to get fancier, obviously we've got 4 major steps in this process. But maybe you have some requirements that surround like AI. So maybe as part of the process, we generate a proxy, send that up to some sort of cloud-based AI service, and it also gives us back metadata. So not only do you now have in the same player your Venera QC markers, but I also have some examples of metadata that's come back from, again, a cloud-based AI service, which gives some contextual information about the media itself. So maybe that's required for building sidecar files or some sort of metadata ingest into a MAM, but all that is possible using the modern tools of media supply chain orchestration. I think that's it for the demo. I'm going to hand it back to Curtis for some more comments.
Yeah, thanks, Anand. I think we're doing well for time, so we'll hop into some questions. They're coming in fast and furious. First one is fairly generic and it applies to all, but I'll hand it back. Look, I'm gonna go to Emmanuel with this. So will all these solutions run together on-prem now? And when that's working, when I'm ready to migrate to the cloud, can I migrate to the cloud later? Which may take a while. So can it also run in a hybrid way during that migration process, which could take a long time in the real world? Emmanuel, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that this is really a specificity for all our solutions here. They can work on-prem, they work in the cloud, they can work in hybrid way. What we're seeing is still a lot of content owners having their libraries on-prem. To be honest, we're discussing that with MC when we're preparing the presentation today. This is something that we see very often. But still, obviously, typically, as Anand was mentioning, the ability to have part of the library, part of the process in the cloud, starting to move some workflows to the cloud. Obviously, this is or having elements of the library in the cloud or through multi-sites, private clouds, public clouds, by the way, many different flavors. This is something that we see obviously very often. And by design, our applications are built, to be able to be deployed in these different scenarios. Typically regarding the orchestration, it's really something that's where we help, by shifting workloads between those different infrastructure environments, because obviously now you have multiple sites, multiple operations, different stakeholders involved into those different processes, because obviously you automate, but you also have still some stakeholders in the organization looking and doing all the supervision. And depending on how they move, depending on the business models also as well, and how fast you want to move and distribute your content, and how you distribute, and who will be your final distribution points, you might want to be able to have a lot of agility. And this is what we offer. And so the short answer is yes. And most importantly, that also gives the ability for customers, all of us, all our customers, to have sovereignty regarding their data. They can really decide where they want to put their content and deploy the workflows around it, and not the other way around.
Yeah, I can steal a line from Dom. Dom is always saying to people, and in the case of all of us, all the systems are built that you can put the solution where the content is stored. If all the content's in the cloud, put in the cloud. And that does not mean it has to be SaaS. It means it can be your infrastructure that you've contracted in AWS or elsewhere. Or you can run it on workstations under desks, or you can run it in a data center across town or down the hall. Craig has does anybody else have any more comments to add? Yes, MC, your microphone, please. No, your mic. I'm telling the sound guy to turn on his mic. There he is.
So the thing that Emmanuel mentioned is, if your media is on-prem, it makes sense to process it on-prem. If it's in the cloud, it makes sense to process it in the cloud. I would say in the last 4 years, there's been a lot of excitement about the cloud and a desire for a lot of people to move to it, or at least pressure, I would say, rather than desire. And one of the things we found with our clients is during COVID, there was a big frenzy because people were working from home. So we did have some customers who basically said, we have some content in the cloud, some content on-prem, and we'd like to work the system. And this was a commercial agreement at the time because we didn't have the technology. We allowed them permission to run our engine in both the cloud and on-prem on a commercial arrangement where we tried to understand the usage. So it gave them some flexibility. As we progressed on, we have a lot more flexibility, but really the models aren't as well defined as it would appear. I think they're still evolving. And I think all of us as small businesses talk to our customers and work hard to accommodate them as they need them.
That's right. The future takes a long time.
Yeah, and then the only I guess rule or a piece of advice is egress is very expensive. So if it's in the cloud, process it in the cloud and keep it in the cloud, unless you need it on-prem, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And if I can add one.
Yeah, go ahead, Dom.
One very quick comment, because I feel quite strongly about this, that we as vendors shouldn't be dictating to the customers how they run their businesses. It's up to you, the user, the content owner, the customer, to decide whether you want to operate in cloud or, as you said, in a workstation under your desk. It's really not up to us. So we really strive to make sure that we fully support all of those options.
Yeah, for sure.
One aspect regarding this, I think that is really important, we're talking about simplification, is the idea about having best of breeds applications, but also with open APIs. And I think the fact that we have now open APIs architecture, software-defined applications with low-code capability, you can really adapt, and you have this flexibility by design in the way. So it's less a question about infrastructure. It's more a question about operations and how you want to deploy and which workflows you want to automate. How do you want to handle exceptions? And it's more related often to transformation projects about who will be doing what from where to what type of content. And depending on how the business evolves, you have all these different, you have the tooling, the open APIs, the architecture, the design of the software to make it possible to have this agility over time.
Thanks, Emmanuel. We have a question from Craig. This came in early. Hopefully he's here with us to hear the answer. Craig's question, there's no standardization, so to speak. So when you validate, this, Fereidoon, this is primarily for you. Are you validating against a certain spec? Are you looking at what is somebody's going to need to end up with, or to a generic spec that a vendor can then transcode and spec down the line? Or are you validating against a spec that has market share, like Apple's expectations or Netflix's? Now that's on the validation part. Well, at the end, yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually, it could be a mixture of all of those. So in some cases, yeah, it is very vendor specific. Netflix has a very specific set of requirements that may be different from Amazon Prime Video or some other platforms. So the validation that you do, particularly at the very end before you deliver, is, do I have the right spec for that particular platform? At the same time, there are other things that you would want to check regardless. As I mentioned before, do I have a media offline sitting right in the middle of my content? Do I have mute? My audio is missing somewhere in there for 2 minutes. There's no audio. Black frame. So some of those things you can generically look for, but more specifically, as you hone in for a particular platform, you want to make sure that your specs, your QC requirements, your QC checks match those. And that's what we do with these QC templates. And our customers they can have template for each platform and for each delivery. And one last piece is the compliance QC, verification for presence of foul language. You define what the foul language is, but the presence of that can be checked, or smoking or drinking or other things like that. So those are more generic, and again, applicable depending on what region of the world that content is being delivered.
Great, thank you. Question from Nate.
MC wants to add something.
Yeah.
I say the same thing. I think the spec may not be specific, but depends on the sort of company you are. If you are, for example, just a broadcaster, all you're really saying, does the content, apart from missing elements, as Fereidoon has pointed out, if the content is ready to go and doesn't need any correction or so on, is it meet the loudness spec? Does it meet a certain other spec? If you're somebody who needs to distribute to 20 different companies or platforms, then you have to make it work for 20 different specifications. So one of the things we see, for example, is a station may only want stereo, may only want 5.1 or both, or they may want Dolby E encoding. So that's what this process allows you to do, is to say, for this client, I create this version. And it may not involve any of the other checks, although those other checks are also required. But there's two sides of it. And what Venera does a good job of is identifying some of the areas where there's content-related sensitivities, as you pointed out, for censorship reasons. Yeah. But the sort of audio things we do are purely for saying a 5.1 is required and it hasn't been supplied with one, or there is a theatrical mix that needs to be modified for Apple delivery or Netflix delivery, and a process would be applied. So the media owner doesn't actually know what they have to do to make it good for a particular delivery. And that's why they would go to a third party to have them take care of those things. This combination is really designed to satisfy that.
Yes. The gentleman tasked with representing the content transform companies have been modest today. MC just reminded me of that when he said, maybe somebody wants 5.1 and the content is stereo. So just to be clear, these tools do some pretty amazing things. MC's tools will create a 5.1 out of a stereo source. Dom's video tools will make a 60-minute program 58 minutes long. That's 2 minutes of commercials. That obviously more than pays for itself in commercial sales, et cetera, et cetera. There's some pretty remarkable things that are going on these days. Nate has a question. Nate's question is effectively one of those "how long is a piece of rope" questions, but we should talk about it in general, in however specificity we can get to. What are you meaning by the term cost-effective? That's really good. I'd ask that question if someone said, "Oh, this is really cost-effective." Oh, really? What does that mean? Who wants to tackle that first?
I can jump in if you like.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Dom.
So, yeah, it is a how long is a piece of string question, but I think when you say cost-effective, you have to stack it up against perhaps the alternative. And historically, the alternative, if I had a series of a TV show and I needed to sell it, needed work done, I'd probably go either to an external service provider or maybe an in-house department. And maybe they'd be pulling it into edit suites, maybe they'd be pulling it into multiple pieces of software to fix the audio and then do some of the video stuff. And that gets very expensive very quickly. I would say that a rough rule of thumb would be that an automated process like the one we're describing today would probably come in an order of magnitude cheaper than using a service provider. So, probably, like I say, as a rule of thumb, you might expect it to be 1/10 of the cost of using a service provider. That's just my personal opinion. Others might disagree, and it really does depend on how much content you're processing and what you're trying to do and all of those things. I would also say that some of the processes that we at Cinnafilm do and that MC can do at Emotion simply aren't amenable to being done manually. Our denoise processes and so on, or the run length adjustment that you alluded to, Curtis, they're not things you can really easily do in a manual scenario and get the same result. So there's a little bit of that as well, but I would say I'll stand by we're about 1/10 of the cost of perhaps more traditional ways of doing things.
Sure, thank you.
Let me add one thing and then MC. In terms of cost effective, I alluded to it earlier as well. When you're looking at thousands of files that you need to process, the whole notion of having to look at every one of those and then pass it on to someone else to fix it is crazy. It's not practical. And that's where the cost effectiveness comes in, is that, the fact that you have a bunch of stereo files and you need to deliver 5.1. MC stuff can do amazing things and just convert that into a 5.1 and be automated, versus if you were to do this manually, if it is possible to do manually, it would cost a lot of money. Or what Dom can do in terms of up-resing or frame conversion, all those kind of things. When you automate this process, you're taking out a lot of time and associated costs out of the process, particularly when you're looking at scale and volume.
For sure.
So yeah, the comment I would make is cost effectiveness. I'll answer it two ways. When we first started, it was the commercials houses that were delivering content worldwide, and so they said we need to meet the loudness spec for Brazil or France or whatever, and so we helped them build libraries for each one of those. So now this is what we call a data technician or a tape op in the old days. This guy had to say, this is going to Brazil, so he needs this spec. And the ability to pull down the spec and press a button and be assured that the content would comply with that was very cost effective. And we would create a report that actually says this is what the output complies to. And so that's one form of cost effectiveness. He's saying you're not throwing it back to into post to get it done. The second side is where we have clients who are processing 10,000 hours of content a month. And within that, there may be 50, 60 workflows. And in the case of one of our clients, they have 200 different variations of audio that they have to deal with. Now, that's a testament to how poorly the supply chain, as the supply of media is coming into this place. And in the old days, when we had tape, there was a lot of constraint on what you could do, right? Now we have files, people are just digging the stuff out and sending it to them, and these guys are trying to monetize it. Now, if you bought a library, and I go back to my faulty trousers, and you went to the BBC and said, you know, we want to buy 1,000 hours of content from you for putting on our platform, they may give you what they had in their archive without any processing and ask you to do it or an intermediary to do it. And when you're talking about 10,000 hours a month, for example, you wouldn't be able to hire the manpower and make it happen in a timely manner, and it certainly wouldn't be cost effective. So these are good ways to look at them. They're clearly gray areas or different gradations between the commercials delivery to this, but to the fact that we've managed to satisfy both those areas is really what we're talking about.
For sure. I got to move on to the next question. And this is really going to be a discussion point, and we'll try to keep, we've got a bunch of questions. We'll try to keep this brief. SJ had a question about, and this is a good sign. SJ wants to know, where's the link that I can go to start doing this? I'll start by saying this is early days. A lot of what we're anticipating is bespoke, which would require a conversation with the service providers that you think you require. You may not require all four. You may require Embrace and Venera. You may require MC and Fereidoon for now, or what have you, or all four. But currently, it's a bespoke conversation. We'll see how things go. It inevitably, you know, if we all think big thoughts, there will be a web link where the magic, you know, the miracle can occur. Does anybody have any comments about that, Emmanuel?
Maybe one comment also in regard to cost effectiveness. We don't have a link to click on, but the thing is, I'm going back to the simplicity of integrating those different components together, and I think this is also something that we were discussing with MC when we were preparing the topic about this webinar. Is in the past you add a gigantic lead time to be able to integrate and pull all this together. It was all manual. Then we had the software where individually we had to go, but we didn't have the throughput. If you wanted to have the throughput, you needed automation, and you need fully bespoke automation that you had to maintain, engineering time, lead time, system integration time. This is going away. This is also a key message that we wanna say, is that lead time now to integrate and configure has also reduced a lot over time. And especially now, again, with Open API, low code, modern orchestration, and another element that we have not talked a lot is task management, meaning that you can manage now exceptions, because in all this flow of automation and workflows, if you have an error, if you need to interact with someone in a department, at media operations typically, this person can be notified, prompted, they only manage exceptions, and then it goes back to, maybe I know I'm taking this example with Fereidoon or MC, but typically with some customers, sometimes we have 48 different audio workflows running, and it's just a click of a button, and depending on the exception that needs to be handled and managed, it goes automatically to the right one. So I think this ability to adapt also this type of media supply chain integration to the requirement of your organization is really key, and the lead time to do so has really accelerated. So in terms of cost effectiveness, I think this is also an important aspect. Right.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I want to throw something over to Anand. What we've been talking about today has been about the combined solutions of these four companies, which tend to represent a core of any complete media supply chain, but it's obviously not completely complete and needs to plug into other parts. Anand, what, as a solutions architect and a guy who's in the business of integrating solutions and platforms, what would be the ramifications, the expectations for somebody to come along and say, well, I store my stuff here. This is my storage solution. This is the company I use to move my content data around, my data, my secure private data transport company, and so on. Everything I make has to go to this localization service and so on. What types of things can people expect when they hit those challenges if they're looking at this combined solution?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Curtis. I think that one of the benefits, and I'm not just saying this as a guy who worked for Embrace, of the solution overall here is the fact that it's designed to do exactly what you're describing. Like, we don't sell bespoke solutions. We have some valuable partners, as we've seen on today's call, but our goal in general is to allow customers to use their best of breed tools in conjunction with our product. We don't want them to have to reinvent the wheel if they've already got some stuff they like using. And best of breed means different things to a lot of people. So we're not there to necessarily question the customer's decisions. If they have stores that they prefer, if they have specific tools, MAM tools, transcoding tools, AI tools, whatever those may be, we're there to just tie all those together and let them turn their existing processes into an automated media supply chain process.
Yeah, and I think just like the colored blocks with the logos in it behind these guys, what we're talking about here today is not a bunch of Lego blocks that have been glued together and you have to take it the way it's handed to you. These are Lego blocks, and you can choose what you need. And if you have something else you use for video transcodes or transformations or audio and so on, those plug in. I mean, maybe you just want to work with Embrace to begin with and use what you have now, and then maybe you discover, oh, emotion is superior to what I'm doing, and I'm going to make a swap. And obviously you can make that swap easily because Embrace is already integrated with emotion. All right, Craig has a question, another question. The platform solution, is it client facing, internal only, or shared between the two? I'm not entirely sure I understand that, but I think I get where he's coming from. I think he's referring that he's probably referring, Anand, to what you were showing.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And Craig, to answer the question really easily, it's kind of whatever you want. So we have customers that are using that same portal that you saw internally, and clients can log into it directly to submit jobs or monitor jobs. And each dashboard, since it's fully customizable, can be locked down. So if you want client versions where they don't really have permission to change stuff, you can do that. If you want internal admin versions, you can do that. So again, the world is kind of your oyster. We just let you customize as much as you want.
Okay, and Craig is right on the ball. He's responding in real time, Anand. He would like to know if there's real-time KPIs that are going to populate infographics and give him eye candy on the screen.
Yeah, there are, and I think all of our products offer that. The cool part is because Embrace, in this example, is acting as the glue between the different products you saw here today. It can gather all the valuable information provided by Pixel Strings, Venera QC reports, and the emotion systems process, and then present that within its own dashboards or export the logs automatically to populate something like Grafana.
Yeah, very cool. One more question, probably our last question. The question from Navin. What is the best way to convince content? Here we go. What is the best way to convince content owners to keep their data on the cloud for further processing in terms of this automated workflow that's been shown, as well as to achieve more monetization of their content? And what are some various ways to monetize content? But basically, let's go back to the beginning. How do you get content owners to keep it, to put everything on the cloud and keep it there?
Let me start my piece of it. I think some of the hesitation about the use of cloud in the past has been that the same set of tools didn't exist on cloud as it did on-prem. And so that caused some issues. But however, I think MC mentioned it before, and Dom also mentioned, if there are a lot of workflows that have already kind of moved to the cloud. If your content is in the cloud, there are tools. MC stuff works in the cloud. Dom stuff works in the cloud. Embrace, Pulsit works in the cloud and on-prem. And our stuff, of course, works in the cloud on-prem. So if your content is in the cloud, there's really no reason to have to bring it back down to do anything with it, egress charges and so on. You can keep it on the cloud. And then the flexibility. I've been talking to a customer last week that they're insisting, because they're receiving the stuff in the cloud, they're delivering all of the world. They're not going to bring it down to edit it. They're not going to do anything on-prem. They just want to keep it in the cloud and do so. And so my response is, if your content is there already, there are plenty of tools, including 4 of ours, that can do everything in the cloud and help you deliver. But if your content is on-prem, you want to continue there, you can do that as well. But if you're up there, there's no reason to have it to bring it down.
You bet. MC, yes, sir.
I just wanted to add to that, that it simply is 2 aspects of this. If you want to convince a content owner to keep the content of the cloud, we have a couple of customers who we work with who started off with their client saying, we have a library, we want to deliver it to, in this instance, it was to Pluto. And then they realized that the supplier took all that pain away from them. And then they said, we don't want to do this every time we want to monetize it with another platform. So they then actually encouraged the actual supplier to say, if you keep our content in the cloud, and then when we want to just have you deliver it to XYZ, then you can do it. And the way to answer the question is, if you win the trust of that client, that A, you have the ability to deliver it, and B, you will look after their content because it's of value that you want, then those things are possible. And as Fereidoon said, all the tools are now available in the cloud for whatever transformation is required.
Yeah, and the experience is transparent. I mean, it's you don't know where the stuff is, and you don't know what you're doing. You don't know that you're talking to a computer in Portland, Oregon, or Frankfurt.
And there is one also very simple aspect is it's all about auto scaling. You scale up and down, and when you don't use it, you shut it down. When you need it, you open it. So depending also on the magnitude of content that you need to process, sometimes you will have peaks, and you need to deliver that in a very short period of time because your customer is requiring it. So in that case, you need to auto scale and scale up, and you have all the scalability of the cloud to be able to do so. And in some other cases, you need to cool things down and have just your operations at a minimum level. So that's this elasticity. I think it's a basic to say that about the cloud, but it's a reality for our customers, and especially Canada ones.
Yeah, and it's a real mind bender. It's obvious when it's described and people think about it, they go, of course, but until you almost make some spreadsheets and do some drawings and realize what the implication is. If you're a facility, it's as though at 9 in the morning I have one facility. At noon I'm running 10 facilities. And at 3 o'clock I'm back to 1, and then at 5 I go home. I had a customer once that we were talking about this topic, and they were comparing it to their experience of using a famous piece of hardware in a rack to convert a movie. It was 90 minutes long, and this device would take 90 minutes to convert it. How long will a software solution take? I did a calculation on the AWS instance that we run on, and I said, looks like it's going to take 75 to 80 minutes. And he said, okay, how long will it take me to do 10 movies? And I said, 75 to 80 minutes. And that's when the light went on. So we're at 9:59, gentlemen. I think we've covered all of the questions. Craig, you had, yes, when we followed up with that. That's great. I want to thank everybody who attended. Thank you so much for joining us from wherever you are in the world. Gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for being here at various times in your your locales, MC and Emmanuel, time for dinner.
And for football.
Everybody else, thanks so
And
much.
for
We'll see
football, yeah.
you. We'll see you again. We will be following up with all of you by emails, and we will be talking to you about IBC, where you can meet all of us in person and get into this conversation in